Joyce's voice, speaking to Hide, flows into Mitch's ear like the sound of rain, like a waterfall. The walls of the building are thick, and even though many windows are broken, the floor remains dry in patches. The dark water spreads and spreads, putting Mitch on edge. An ominous feeling comes over him. After the third murder, Yonko told Mitch that he should leave Japan. That it wasn't Tabo but Mitch and Kazu who were suspected of being the murderers. But that's not exactly how it went, Mitch thinks inside the church, shaking his head and rubbing his face with his hands. Had the three of them met after that? Yes, they didn't even know for sure if this had been Tabo's doing, but they couldn't shake the feeling of unsafety. And then, a year or so after that, Mama had died, which prompted Yonko's mother to tell Yonko for the first time about the rumours that were circulating about them. Now that Mama's gone and she can't protect you, it will be too dangerous for you both, Yonko had said to Mitch and Kazu in a desperate bid to get them to leave Japan. Hello, ohayo gozaimasu. And I thought I'd take a little bit of a detour with this video into Japanese literature, something I haven't always done. There are a few book-based reviews and blogs on my website, culturaljapan.com, but the focus on the channel here has largely been cinematic, and that will continue. That's my preeminent sort of love and lifeblood, if you like. But I am very interested in all aspects of Japan and Japanese culture, and to wit, I read a lot of Japanese literature and have been reading recently an author whose work is appearing more and more in translation, but who I think as it stands remains not overly well known in the West, certainly in the UK. So I thought I'd say a few words about her work. That novelist is Tsushima Yuko. As of now, you can find a collection of 2 short stories of Dogs and Walls and 3 novels / novellas, Territory of Light, Child of Fortune and Wildcat Dome. And I would recommend that you dive into these books, and dive is an appropriate metaphor because of the kind of ever-presence of water. One of the stories in Of Dogs and Walls is called The Watery Realm, and water features very, very prominently in all of her work, in various ways, I think, and to various thematic or metaphorical ends. So it seems like a good place to start. For those of you who don't know, Tsushima comes from very renowned literary stock. Her father was the novelist Dazai Osamu, whose career, tragically short as it was, produced some of the most significant novels in post-war Japan, particularly The Setting Sun. He's a novelist who isn't often ranked alongside the likes of Kawabata Yasunari or a little bit later Mishima Yukio as the key sort of titans of post-war Japanese fiction. But I think with The Setting Sun in particular, he really should be. Tsushima's work owes comparatively little to her father's novels, which is a great strength. I think she felt her own voice pulling in different directions. Not from the point of view of representing a different generation. I think there's very little sense of Tsushima feeling like she represents anything, which is a great, great strength, I think. Her work often has female protagonists, but there is a refreshing, certainly within the context of Japanese culture, lack of a sense that women are being used to say something. There's a famous quote by the Japanese actress Hidari Sachiko, star of Imamura Shohei's The Insect Woman, amongst other key works from Japan in the 50s and 60s and shortly thereafter. She said that, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the exact quote to hand, but if you want to say something about Japan, you have to use women. That female figures have to be the focal point if one is to explore and comment upon Japan and Japanese society. And there is, to my mind, some truth to this. Obviously, the prominence of female protagonists, not just in new wave works like The Insect Woman and the films of Yoshida Kiju, but also in classical Japanese cinema. I mean, the number of directors whose work has been described as feministo, Mizoguchi Kenji, Kinoshita Keisuke, Ozu Yasujiro to a certain extent. There are others. The list is a long one, and that sense of trying to say something through women or represent something through women is very strong. And of course, it's led to some great and penetrating works. And the fact that Japan has always been a very firmly entrenched patriarchal country with attendant sort of issues around gender inequality suggests that the specificity of Japanese society and, you know, corporate culture, professional culture in terms of producing, the fact that that has been split in terms of divisions of labour between the personal and the professional, or the familial and the professional, largely. I mean, changes have, and significant changes have been made over the last sort of 2 or 3 decades. And obviously with the recent election of a female prime minister, I think all kinds of shifts are beginning to be felt. But gender inequality still persists, and issues surrounding women trying to balance being mothers and being professional women still persist. So the fact of so many sort of female protagonists in Japanese cinema and beyond in other areas of culture suggests that still one can only get at the specificity of Japanese cinema by focusing on issues of gender. I'm currently editing a book and writing a book in which notions of masculinity figure strongly, because I think that is a subject that has been too little considered. Anyhow, I digress. What is refreshing about Tsushima's work, despite her sort of narrative focus on women, and I use the term narrative loosely because her works are very loose-limbed, very digressive, very character-driven. But the focus on women is not, at least to my mind, I mean, this may well be an arguable point, and if any of you are familiar with her work and want to contest what I'm saying, please feel free to drop a comment below. But to my mind, there is a refreshing lack of using women to say something. As great as, directors like Mizoguchi and Imamura and Yoshida can be and frequently were, the sense of enshrining women as spokespersons for social ills in quite a sort of grandiloquent way can become a little bit heavy. And in Tsushima's work, there is a comparative lack of this heaviness. The women are frequently single mothers, so there's certainly a strong sort of sense in her work that women are struggling. He focuses on working class characters, and in something like Territory of Light, the notion of struggling to bring up a child is very much to the fore. Similarly, in Wildcat Dome, a lot of young characters are both orphans and mixed race, being the children of black American GIs, which was a strong issue in Japanese society in the post-war era. Something that a film I reviewed recently, Eros Plus Massacre, already touched on, or already touches on. And the problems that the women looking after these orphans have is in many ways central to that novel. So there is definitely a strong sense that the women in Tsushima's work are on the lower rungs of society and are in various ways put upon, in very real ways, struggling materially more than anything else. But importantly, they aren't treated, and indeed never really view themselves as victims in any grand sense. The women are content, not necessarily with their lot, but they are women who only sort of yearn for simple pleasures, and whatever they have to deal with, whether it be sort of problematic, almost everyday occurrences like a flood in Territory of Light, or whether they are trying to process more tragic events such as a drowning in Wildcat Dome. They tend to make the best of what they've got and try and sort of... I don't really think saying muddle through is necessarily the right phrase. These are women who aren't groping towards anything better. They are able to find pleasures in close relationships and in trying to, just carve for themselves a little piece of the world that they can call their own. And though they suffer at the hands of men, there's very little sense that this is suggestive of wider social ills. And I think the aforementioned focus on water in some ways reflects this. In Japanese art and history and society, the notion of water carries very specific connotations. The so-called mizu shobai, or the water trade, is a sort of colloquialism for prostitution and sex work, none of which features in Tsushima's work. Indeed, there is a very practical sort of presence of water. It's not a metaphorical sort of construct or a symbolic or loaded facet of her work. There is drowning, there is flooding, there is in the watery realm issues surrounding a young mother and her son's obsession with a little model castle to go in an aquarium, a home aquarium. And this is the sort of point of departure for a really moving sort of miniature consideration of some of the tensions of growing up, of intergenerational relationships and domestic travails. So there is almost a sort of reclaiming of the water story here. Mizu Shobai, as I said, water trade. Here, water is valued, if that's the right word, for its ever presence in our lives. And although you may argue that if Tsushima is countering the sort of metaphorical imperatives around using and representing water, that she is doing something sort of equally grand. I think that it's more a sense that she is rooting her work, however much it has sort of subjective reveries and both poetical and at least quasi-philosophical disquisitions, that she is rooting her work in the practicalities of everyday life, that it is the very mundane problems that occupy her focus, even though, as I've said, this is often a platform or a foundation for grander writing. And this grander writing, I think, often comes in the form of narratives that dovetail back and forth between past and present, often in ways that aren't immediately clearly legible. There is a strong sense of different characters as focalizers and their memories, their feelings. In Wildcat Dome, their perceptions and the sort of primacy of how they may or may not be remembering an incident correctly. All of these are as key to the stories as the events that unfold. Indeed, in Wildcat Dome, if one were to posit a kind of literary forebear or progenitor for Tsushima, I think Akagawa Ryosuke perhaps comes closest. There is a strong sense of a kind of Rashomon-like narrative nodal point that is viewed from different perspectives and kind of obsessed over by characters, or there's an attempt to try and remember something that keeps sort of that keeps escaping characters. They kind of fail to grasp the meaning of something, or they obsess over the meaning of something, and indeed obsess over obsessing about the meaning of something. So the two facets of her work that I think best represents the specificity of her style are these sort of subjective inquiries on the one hand, and this sense of having a very naturalistic, very almost quotidian sort of foundation, or at least point of departure, on the other. So I definitely give her work a read. I've deliberately held off from going into the kinds of stories she tells, you know, in terms of specific characters, because I really think that this doesn't kind of represent the real force of Tsushima's work. They're not about the stories they tell. And indeed, we have to work hard to piece those stories, such as they exist, together. It's about the piecing together. That is what's most important. It's about how characters process what happens and what has happened, and by extension, it's about how we process that and sort of, to go back to water, pour ourselves into the text, into the sort of interstitial gaps that are forever sort of percolating in and around her narratives. So definitely, I would give her a read. As I said, there's plenty you can find in translation now, and her key works are available as such. So do dive into her work. Sorry to labour a clumsy metaphor. Let me know what you think. Like and subscribe. It would be much appreciated. And stay tuned for much more in the near future. Goodbye for today. The Water's Edge. During the night, there had been a sound of water on the other side of the wall. In my sleep, I was looking out from the fourth floor bedroom at nearby buildings, bathed in rain, gleaming with neon and street lamp colours. It was a light, tenuous sound. I couldn't say at what hour of the night it had started. It could well have been there when I went to bed. Then again, it could have been an illusion as I was on the brink of waking. In the morning, when I opened the windows wide, dazzling sunlight burst in, together with the thrum of traffic. The sky was pure blue, the streets were dry, perfectly dry, even in the shade. Happy to see another fine day, I set about waking my daughter without wondering where the night's rain could have got to, leaving not the slightest puddle. I had a feeling that it was still raining elsewhere, somewhere like that spot I couldn't quite reach behind my back. It was a lingering sensation, close at hand, of water in the distance. I had almost dismissed it as a dream, but not entirely.